So Resident Evil Requiem released a new trailer at the Game Awards, and Capcom finally answered some of the questions that we've been wondering about since the first reveal of the game, like who is the man in the chair and who is the second protagonist of the game. However, with these answers comes even more questions, leaving us with more mysteries than ever before. So on this episode of Nerd Space Games, we'll be taking a look at the biggest questions that we still have about RE9 and the main story of the game thanks to the most recent trailer. We'll also be going over my personal theories regarding the answers to each of these questions. Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more survival horror content. Also hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. Finally, don't forget to check out the official Nerd Space Games shop, which features artwork inspired by your favorite Resident Evil characters designed by the very talented Demento Artworks. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerd Space Games, and here are the 10 biggest questions that we still have about Resident Evil Requiem. Let's get it. Number 1, what is Elpis? Probably the biggest mystery that popped up thanks to the most recent trailer at the Game Awards is the one surrounding Elpis. While the word Elpis has been around since Tokyo Game Show, in which official t-shirts featured an article titled What is Elpis, it wasn't until the Game Awards that we actually saw how important this term is to the main story of RE9. I won't dive too much into it as I have a whole video dedicated to Elpis. Go check that out by the way when you get a chance. But long story short, here's what we know about Elpis. Victor Gideon is in charge of Project Elpis, an operation sanctioned by the US government prior to the fall of Raccoon City. Raccoon City was chosen to be destroyed by the government to protect whatever Elpis is. Grace's blood is the key to setting Elpis free apparently, and Leon has some sort of dark secret in relation to Elpis according to the director of the game. Of course, there's a lot that we can discuss here, but again, I have a whole video dedicated to this topic in which I go over a ton of different theories that I have about it, including one of which is about Grace potentially being a test tube baby. So yeah, again, go check that video out. But I will leave it at this. Elpis appears to be the successor to the T-Virus and Grace's blood, maybe because of the daylight vaccine or for some other reason. Regardless, this is the key to balancing the virus apparently in a way that creates the next step in evolution, something that Oswald E. Spencer has been trying to achieve since he founded Umbrella all of those years ago. As for what Elpis is, Capcom and the creative team behind Resident Evil Requiem has been very vocal about the fact that Elpis is a major part of the story and the plot, and it's something that will tie everything that we've seen so far together. Number 2, what happened at the care center? Based on the trailers that we've seen so far, we can assume that Elpis is an improved virus compared to its predecessor, the T-Virus. This is why we've seen so many zombies in the trailers, but with improved intelligence and noticeable differences in the way that these zombies look compared to the ones infected with the T-Virus. So with that assumption, that means the zombies that we've seen Grace and Leon taking down so far at the care center are potentially victims that were infected with the Elpis virus, right? Here's the thing though, how did the outbreak at the care center occur? This is a question that I don't really see a lot of people asking, honestly. Probably because we're so used to random outbreaks in public areas in our favorite Resident Evil games, but this one is a little more concerning. Or intriguing would probably be a better word. Either Leon or Grace arrive at the care center, right? Who are then greeted by a mysterious woman, more on her later, but clearly she doesn't appear to be infected and everything at the care center appears to be operating normally, right? Well, we also see a picture later of Victor Gideon with his research team, some of which we see in the form of zombies later in the trailer. So if things are so normal, then what the hell happens to the place that ultimately ends in most of the employees turning into zombies and a terrifying BOW roaming around freely? Did this BOW break out and affect the employees while Grace was recovering from her surgery? Did Victor Gideon release Elpis and the BOW on purpose when Leon arrived to help deal with Leon? Or was there a third party involved that caused an outbreak as an attack against Gideon and his team to hide a darker secret regarding what Elpis really is and who is really in charge of the project? Well, that last question actually brings us to another mystery regarding Resident Evil Requiem. Number 3, who is Victor Gideon working for? Since the first reveal of the game, I've always thought that the man in the chair, later revealed to be Victor Gideon, would be the main villain of the game. However, I was only going with this assumption because I believe that Gideon was actually Oswald E. Spencer, the true villain that would tie the entire plot of Resident Evil 9 to the entire plot of the series thus far. But with the reveal that the man in the chair is in fact not Spencer, it now makes me doubt Gideon as the main villain of the game. In fact, I'm getting a lot of similar vibes with RE9's marketing and both RE7 and Resident Evil Village's marketing. See, in those games, you mostly have a different villain marketed more than the true main villain of the game. In RE7's case, you had Jack Baker, who dominated most of the trailers before Evelyn received a few hints here and there of being the true villain of the game later in the marketing. In Village, you obviously had a lot of Lady Dimitrescu marketed as the main villain in the trailers before Mother Miranda was revealed to be the true main villain of the game. So I do think Resident Evil Requiem could be doing a similar thing here, in which Gideon would turn out to be a red herring or some sort of anti-hero, not the true main villain of the game. And if that's that's true, then it sparks an interesting question. If Victor Gideon is not the main villain of Resident Evil Requiem, then who is he working for, or who is the true main villain of the game? Well, I mentioned this in that different video of mine that I was talking about earlier, but I think both Victor Gideon and another man in the trailers, FBI agent Nathan Dempsey, is working for some sort of evil organization run by the true main villain of the game. And with Resident Evil 9 having the title Requiem, it has to be someone that is connected to the lore of the franchise thus far. And as I'm sure a lot of you guys can guess by now if you've seen a lot of my videos, my immediate thought goes to Oswald E. Spencer. He is the one that first started to look for the way to advance the human race through generations of forced evolution, so Elpis would kind of honestly be right up his alley. There's a lot of other theories I have in terms of who Victor works for, like how the family from Resident Evil 6 might be involved, but there's one thing that I'm certain of. He's not the main villain of the game. I'm willing to bet everything on that, and he's clearly working for someone or some sort of major organization. Is it the Connections, Oswald E. Spencer, the family, or is it someone else that we've seen in the trailers already, but we didn't realize they were main villain material yet? Which actually kind of brings me to the next question. Number 4, who are the Hooded Man and the Mysterious Woman? I know it might seem weird to talk about these two characters, and maybe I'm looking too much into each of them, but hear me out. First off, let's talk about the Hooded Man. For the longest time, Capcom made it appear that the man in the chair and the Hooded Man are the same guy. However, I've always said since they're revealed that these two men do not look like the same guy at all to me. Even when you take into consideration that there's about, an 8-year time gap between the two times we've seen this version of the same character potentially, there's a lot that's just not lining up for me. Since obviously Victor Gideon is changed completely by the time Grace meets him in the trailer, I said want to compare the Hooded Man to the picture of Victor Gideon that we see with his research team in the trailer. The first thing I noticed is that the Hooded Man doesn't appear to be nearly as tall as Victor is in the picture. I mean, look at him. The guy towers over all the other researchers in the picture, yet he appears to only be slightly taller than the man he's killing at Renwood Hotel. Also, looking at the facial features, things don't really line up for me here either, especially his chin area and his lips area. Again, I'm just not seeing it. Besides, if Capcom had no problem with revealing Victor Gideon now and what he used to look like in the form of a picture that we saw, why is most of the face of the man in the hood mostly covered still in trailers? It just doesn't make sense for me. There's another line that really catches my attention though. At one point, Victor says the following line:
"Would you like to see what's hidden under the hood?"
Yeah, so this is really intriguing to me as Victor Gideon doesn't appear to be wearing a hood when he first meets with Grace in the trailer. So my thought is that he might be referring to the Hooded Man when he says this line to Grace or Leon, who is a different person. And yeah, I think that this means there's something about this mysterious Hooded Man that's going to shock the person who's talking to or us the players for some reason. Now whether that is because it's him revealing a new form of mutation or if it's just because it's someone that we the players would recognize, that remains to be seen. But I do think, when taking all the facts into consideration, that the Hooded Man is not Victor Gideon. I also want to briefly mention the mysterious secretary that we've seen a few times now in the trailers. She's interesting as she gives off some sort of sinister vibes for me for some reason, but I don't think she's anybody that we should recognize. It's also kind of weird that she seems pretty calm despite some sort of outbreak going on and a BOW roaming around the building, but hey, maybe she's like this before the outbreak occurs. I don't know. You guys let me know. Regardless, the way that this girl looks in this scene specifically, and even the way that she walks, just screams a villain to me. And honestly, I'm kind of getting Mother Miranda and Eve vibes from her, where the trailer points us towards Victor Gideon being the main villain of the game, while this girl is in the trailers, but she's not the focus point of it, but she just seems mysterious and sinister for me for some reason. Okay, so I should say that I'm not saying she will be the main villain of the game, but I'm also just saying that I won't be too surprised if this girl is more terrifying and dangerous than Victor Gideon. Number 5, who is Leon's new contact? With this trailer being the first reveal of Leon as Kennedy in Resident Evil Requiem, there's bound to be a ton of questions that connects him to a lot of different things around him. Let's start with Leon's DSO contact. In previous games and films, Leon has always had the same contact at DSO headquarters, Ingrid Hunnigan. This has been the case since Resident Evil 4. However, the recent trailer revealed to us a new character talking to Leon. How do we know it's someone else? Well, there's two giveaways that Leon's new contact is not Hunnigan. First off, the voice. Her voice sounds completely different from Hunnigan, and I'll talk about who I think she could be in just a second. But the second giveaway is this screenshot right here, which myself and every other content creator out there have noticed that this new contact for Leon apparently has blonde hair. So, a different voice that somehow still feels familiar and blonde hair. Who fits this description? Well, two names come to mind immediately. When I first saw this trailer, my mind immediately thought of Ashley Graham. In Resident Evil 4 Remake, Ashley kind of teased to Leon about joining the DSO and working alongside him. Well, it's been over 20 years since that day, so she's obviously had plenty of time to become an agent and become his new contact. However, the more likely scenario based on all the evidence is that this new contact is Sherry Birkin. As of Resident Evil 6, Sherry already works for the DSO, so she already has an in. Then when you compare this new voice to Sherry's voice from Resident Evil 6, and yeah, you can definitely tell that there's a lot of similarities here. Finally, think about the theme of Resident Evil Requiem. A major part of the plot in this game is Raccoon City, the Raccoon City outbreak, and the return to Raccoon City. Well, Sherry Birkin would be the perfect person to assist Leon with this mission considering her connection to Raccoon City. My hunch still points towards Ashley for whatever reason though, but even I can't deny the amount of evidence that Sherry Birkin has going for her. Regardless of who it is, it's clearly someone other than Hunnigan, which also brings up an interesting bonus question: where is Hunnigan? That's not one of the questions, by the way. I'm just throwing that out there. Where the hell is Hunnigan if someone else has replaced her? Number 6, what is happening to Leon? Considering the fact that Leon somehow ends up infected in just about every single form of media out there, whether it's Death Island or Resident Evil 4, it really shouldn't shock any of us that Leon appears to once again be infected. So a lot of us believe he's infected due to some of the things that we've seen in the trailer so far. Firstly, Leon appears to have a similar infection as the zombies roaming around the care center and Renwood Hotel. I believe this is a big reason why he heads to the care center, because he's trying to find an antidote for whatever he's infected with, probably the Elpis virus. In the same trailer, but a different version of it released to the public, we hear one additional line from Leon's contact that sort of confirms something is wrong with Leon. Play the clip.
Leon, we're running out of time.
When his new contact, probably Sherry Birkin, tells Leon that they are running out of time, my initial thought goes to Leon's infection. Perhaps Sherry is telling Leon that they need to find the vaccine fast or he's going to become a zombie. The last thing that I want to talk about in regards to Leon is his gun. We'll go into more details about Leon's gun in the next question, ironically, but for now I want to zoom in on the fact that Leon clearly has the gun before entering the care center. He literally loads this gun, by the way, in the car and then uses it to rescue Grace from the Hag. Here's the thing though, we've also seen scenes featuring Grace Ashcroft with this same gun. So unless Leon brought a spare for Grace to use, we can assume that something happens to Leon while inside of the care center after rescuing Grace. My guess is that the infection enters a new phase in Leon and Grace has to search the care center for a vaccine to save him. This is why she doesn't leave the facility immediately and she ends up with Leon's gun. On the note of Leon saving Grace, remember that he didn't come there to rescue her. He didn't even know that she was there, meaning that Leon came there for a different reason, and my guess is that it has something to do with his infection and Elpis. Number 7, what is the deal with Leon's gun? As teased in the last question, Leon's gun is an interesting topic to talk about, as this gun clearly has a vital part in the plot of Resident Evil Requiem. Hell, Capcom even says so themselves. Not only does Leon use this gun, but Grace ultimately takes this gun from Leon and then uses it herself at some point. Let's look at all the scenes featuring this gun in the trailer before I talk about why I think this gun is important and compare it to another gun in the lore of the Resident Evil franchise. First off, Leon is clearly the one that starts off with this gun. We see him wielding it in the streets at one point, loading it while he's sitting in a car outside of the Rhodes Hill Care Center, and then we see him use this gun to save Grace from the Hag. Now, based off of the sequences that we've seen play out in the trailer so far, we can conclude that Grace ends up with Leon's gun after she is saved by him. We know this because the demo shows Grace completely defenseless for the entire sequence, and then we know that the demo ends where Leon saves Grace. Now, that means that Leon, for whatever reason, ends up out of commission, and Grace takes this gun for some reason. And in some of the trailers, Capcom went out of their way to spotlight Grace getting this gun like it's very important to her. She examines it in one scene, and in another scene, she's wielding it before taking on some dangerous threat behind the doors that she is about to open. Okay, now theory time, guys. This gun is actually very similar in design to another gun in the Resident Evil franchise, Albert 01. If you don't remember this gun, it appeared at the end of Resident Evil 7, in which Chris threw it down to Ethan, and Ethan used it to kill Eve. We later learned via files that Albert 01 is infused with special rounds that neutralize mold BOWs, hence why it was so efficient in bringing Evelyn down. I feel like that this new gun is something similar to that gun. Actually, fun fact, Resident Evil 7 was directed by the same man directing Resident Evil Requiem, just throwing that out there. Anyway, this gun is probably specifically designed to handle the Elpis virus, which also might hint towards a new theory that a lot of people have been talking about. What if the Elpis virus is a combination of the T virus and the Megamycetes mold? If that's the case, then this theory about Leon's gun having ammunition that neutralizes threats created from the Project Elpis does does make a lot of sense. As to how Leon has his gun, well, clearly he's connected to Elpis in some way based on what Nakanishi has said in interviews. So if he's aware of the Elpis threat, then there's a good chance that he has the right connections that allow him to get his hands on a weapon created specifically to deal with Project Elpis. It would also explain why Leon's gun repelled the Hag so fast when he saved Grace. Number 8, why does Leon go back to Raccoon City? Ever since the reveal of a ruined present-day Raccoon City, fans and creators have been trying to dive deep into the lore of the franchise and come up with a good reason as to why we are revisiting Raccoon City. And after the most recent trailer revealed Leon as Kennedy, it also showed us a scene of Leon driving his Porsche into Raccoon City for some reason. Assuming the events of Renwood Hotel and Rhodes Hill Care Center take place before Leon drives into Raccoon City, we really need to ask the question, why does Leon and potentially Grace feel the need to travel back to Raccoon City in the first place? Now, this isn't a question that's only popped up recently, as it's something that we've been wondering about since the first trailer. However, this most recent trailer shows Leon and Grace at Renwood Hotel and the Care Center before he goes to Raccoon City, meaning that it's not like only Leon goes there to deal with some sort of storyline outside of saving Grace, since we see them interact with each other at the Care Center. We know Leon went to Renwood Hotel to investigate the missing cops, showing similarities to a new BOW threat. We could assume that he went to Rhodes Hill to find a vaccine after becoming infected, or Sherry was able to track down the car leaving the crime scene and ending at the Rhodes Hill Care Center, hence why Leon went there. However, it's much harder to identify why Leon specifically would want to revisit Raccoon City. The most obvious answer is that Leon probably found something about Elpis while investigating the Care Center, and his investigation brought him back to Raccoon City. Perhaps in those files that we saw Leon looking through on the computer, he found out that there was a secret lab operating out of Raccoon City after the city was destroyed. Going back to something some fans have identified, there's a new structure in the most recent trailer versus the original look at the ruined city. This isn't the first time we've seen Capcom remove and then add new yet important details to later trailers. Look at Victor Gideon, for example. Before his face was revealed, we saw a look at this table next to him. However, later trailers after his face was revealed, his helmet was on top of that exact same table in that exact same scene. So perhaps Capcom waited for Leon's reveal before adding this important building to the ruins of Raccoon City, because this building will be a key reason as to why Leon returned to the city that changed his life all of those years ago. Also, another small theory I'm throwing out there, maybe it's just something as simple as Grace being abducted after she saves Leon from his infection at the Rhodes Hill Care Center, and they find out that Grace is brought to Raccoon City, a secret lab over back in Raccoon City. That can also lead Leon to going to Raccoon City to try to save her. Just throwing that out there as well. Number 9, who is the Hag? The final two questions are actually mysteries that we've been wondering about since the first trailer, and quite honestly are the last two remaining questions since that trailer that have received little to no clarity. The first is a reference to the Hag. Yeah, despite the Hag being in every single trailer so far, we still know nothing about who the Hag is, why they are loose in the Care Center of all places, or the origins of this beast. Since she first appeared in the reveal of Resident Evil Requiem, fans have been speculating about all sorts of possibilities for who this Hag could be, from some thinking it was the return of Lisa Trevor to others believing it's Alyssa Ashcroft, Grace's mother. There's honestly been a constant war as to who she is and her importance to the core story of Resident Evil 9. Personally, I lean towards the Hag being Alyssa, and the most recent trailer only solidified that for me. First off, we know that Nathan Dempsey is almost confirmed to be a villain at this point, right? We can assume this because, unless it's poor writing, it's a bit odd that only the officer was reported as missing and Leon was unaware of Grace and the FBI's involvement in the case when he first meets Grace. This means that whoever Victor Gideon is working for has strong ties within the government, and it would be very easy for Victor to get his hands on Alyssa's body after her death and perform experiments on it, potentially creating the Hag. Also, at the end of the demo, Leon saves Grace from the Hag but doesn't kill the Hag. I think this is important to know, as it means the Hag will probably continue to torment Grace during her time in the Care Center even after Leon saves her from it. And this scene of Grace looking at doors wielding Leon's weapon that, as stated earlier, appears to have a strong effect against the Hag makes me think that this is moments before Grace confronts the beast for the last time in a boss fight. So yeah, I feel like Grace will be the one to finish off the Hag, and I think there's a symbolic meaning behind her being the one to do it because it's her own mother. Now more than ever, I think Grace's final boss at the Care Center will be against her own mother, and it's this sequence that'll ultimately motivate Grace to join Leon in Raccoon City in helping stop whoever is really in charge of Operation Elpis. And the final mystery that I think is worth talking about are the two final mysterious voices that we saw in the first trailer. Seeing the first trailer, there are a lot of lines said while B-roll of the ruins of Raccoon City played in the background. Most of them we are able to connect to Alyssa or other characters we've seen so far in the trailers, but there are two voices specifically that don't really seem to connect to anybody yet. Let me play them back to you now.
Have you seen the same shit I've seen?
Everyone's gone.
Okay, so I'll talk about the first voice briefly, as this is something I said in multiple breakdowns I've done in the past, but my ears tell me this is the very talented Jeff Sheen, voice actor for multiple Resident Evil characters, including Chris Redfield in Village and Carlos in RE3 Remake. With Leon's reveal though, and the potential that Sherry Birkin is in the game too, I highly doubt this character will be Chris or Carlos, sadly. I also know that there's theories that this could be one of the other Outbreak survivors that Alyssa is meeting with prior to her death, but honestly, I don't think Resident Evil 9 will feature too many more returning protagonists. I mean, think about it, we already have Leon, probably Sherry, and we can assume we'll probably get an Ada Wong too. Now, this first voice is probably just a brand new character voiced by Jeff Sheen, who is probably someone that Leon or Grace were talking to in regards to the Outbreak at the care center. Now, I want to go back to this second voice, as this one really intrigues me the most. This clearly sounds like a little girl, and based on what we know about the game so far, there's two characters that come to mind, and both of them are actually in the form of flashbacks. The first theory I have is that this is a flashback of Sherry Birkin in Raccoon City when she was a kid. Her comment would be in regards to her roaming around the city all by herself with nobody to protect her before running into Claire. Since there's a high possibility that she is in the game, this flashback to when she was alone in Raccoon City could make a lot of sense, to be honest. But the theory that I really like more, especially since it connects to a theory that I had about Elpis and Grace's true origins, is the fact that this could be a flashback to Grace when she was younger. I'll say this real quick, and if you want more thoughts on my Grace theory, go watch my video on the topic of Elpis. But long story short, I believe that Grace might not be the daughter of Alyssa, or at least not the biological daughter of Alyssa. See, I think Alyssa, and potentially Leon too, found her inside of a lab as a test subject sometime after the Raccoon City outbreak. Alyssa took her in, and the DSO helped hide Grace from Victor Gideon and the organization that he worked for to keep her safe for all of these years, which is why it took so long for Victor Gideon to finally come after Grace and Alyssa. Now, if this theory is true, then I believe that this line is from Grace after she is rescued by the DSO, and Alyssa in regards to the other test subjects, since Grace was the only test subject to successfully bond with the Elpis virus. I know it's kind of a stretch, but I love this theory and I'm sticking with it. But yeah, that's it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. What is the biggest mystery, the biggest question in regards to Resident Evil Requiem that has you the most curious? Do you have any wild theories of your own about some of the mysteries that I talked about in today's video? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.